We talk about ticket prices going too high. Can prices be too high?
And that's the hook, right? Ultimately, what we're trying to do is to not just say, great, that was a great night out. It was a great night out that I want to replicate.
But aren't we managing demand with price? Welcome back to Leading the Way, a series designed for arts and cultural leaders, helping you focus on the strategies and actions that turn relationships into revenue. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes and visit the link in the description below for more insights. This is the first episode in our conversation on demand. Today, we're stepping back to look at what demand really is, why it matters so much right now, and how things like perception of success shape audience behavior long before pricing ever comes into play. So demand, we are therefore going to have a conversation about price, right?
We are having a conversation about price everywhere in the sector right now and in the media.
Yeah, it seems like it's the only thing we talk about when we're talking about revenues and ways in which to drive revenues, that it feels like price is the only tool in our toolbox when really it isn't. And in fact, it may not even be the first tool that you should reach for when thinking about revenues. You should be reaching for tools that are going to help you with demand and managing demand and thinking about how you are leveraging demand to drive your revenues, not just price.
But aren't we managing demand with price?
Well, we are managing behavior with price. We are wanting to create options for folks to find the right price points in the parts of the theater that appeal to them. And then we are calibrating price as demand increases in order to maximize revenue. But for our business in particular, while this may not be true for commodities, right? We aren't a commodity. Live performance is not a commodity. We are not actually stimulating very much demand by fluctuating price. Our pricing is reactive and responsive to where there is or where there isn't demand. We are using price more to inform the choices and the behavior that audiences are making once they've already expressed interest in what it is we have to offer them. They don't even know what the price is until we get them interested enough in the show to go to the website and be clicking around to find the seat that they may want to sit in. That is often the first time they have any awareness of what the price is. But we put it as this really magical tool that is somehow going to make someone all of a sudden decide they want to see a show, is just by telling them, well, we have this price available to you. And I just don't think it works that way.
Well, and the data tells a story that it doesn't.
Right.
Right. It also communicates something about value. Yeah. So if we are, selling our show as something that is, discount priced, then how likely are people going to feel like, I really want to be there? This is someplace that's exciting and people want to go see this show, so I should go see it too.
Totally, Christina, totally. You said, Brad, it's something about behavior. And I think right now in the field and the sector, because price is something that we're using to try to attract people in, and because we feel like it's a lever that we can pull that will create volume, and because we feel fear maybe that some people aren't going to come unless we discount, we are affecting behavior. We're training people to wait for discounts. We're teaching people about value. So it's right now it's a complicated conversation that often leaves money on the table, devalues the product, and devalues and demotivates our team ultimately when we do it the wrong way, I think.
Before we talk about demand, though, I just want to ask, because I think people will be sort of maybe shouting at the screens or the speaker, but we talk about ticket prices going too high. Can prices be too high?
Yes. Yeah, prices can be too high. And yet there is data that can help you figure that out that is more than just your gut. And so I think this is the difference in terms of the practicality of how we think about prices and prices getting too high. Rick Lester founded TRG, and he would say those seats are worth what you can get for them. And if we are in moments of high demand And as long as we are still selling seats at prices that may feel high to us instinctively, or even perhaps to other patrons, if there are some who are still buying, there is, at least from a pure kind of economics point of view, there's a case to make to say those prices are not too high until people are not willing to pay for it. And it's our job to use price and to use tactics to understand what the market will pay for certain products that are in certain levels of demand within certain parts of our venues.
And I think also the point of the sales cycle makes a difference too, because often when we are in high demand, it's towards the end of the sales cycle when people wait to purchase. And there are people that can and will purchase at the higher prices. And in doing so, in allowing them to help support our organization, support this show, support our mission, it enables us to create accessibility early in the sales cycle for people that might be price sensitive. So it actually expands our ability to offer prices that make sense for everyone.
I got stuck on that question a little bit because there's an emotional reaction when prices get really high.
Right.
And we become our own echo chamber and sometimes worst enemy. I remember when Hamilton first came out, or you look at even prices for Harry Styles right now. And those prices are high by any measure. The ticket prices when I went to go buy tickets for Hamilton were $1,000. And I too had an emotional reaction to that. Our boards have emotional reactions. Our artistic leaders, our staffs have emotional reactions. But when people are buying those tickets at that price, they are saying there's a value that I am putting on that event and that experience, and I'm willing. So if there are people that are still buying, most of the time we don't have $1,000 tickets available. But when people are buying £200 or $200 or $250 seats, that funds other things that we're trying to do. And so in fact, our obligation to the missions that we have is to allow the market to help inform what the right price is. But we do have an emotional and a sort of values-based reaction to these high prices.
You talk about the edge cases there, and Christina, you mentioned high demand. When we talk about high and low demand, what we're not talking about is how sold out the venue is or not, right? Because in every organization, levels of demand look different. Can you explain a bit more about that? High demand looks different in every organization.
Sure, in every organization and across different types of programming and audiences. And so one of the things that we talk about is building not just one house, but building 4 houses, because you often have events that are going to have a core audience of loyal, devoted people who love this art form, who are going to want to attend. And it's going to be a smaller part of your house. And so we want to maximize the experience for them. We want to make that audience feel like this is a high demand performance, both in the experience, and there's an opportunity for us, knowing that we can expect probably this level of demand, that we can create options for pricing at different points in the sales cycle, even in those instances. And when we do have the big blockbuster or the big show that can sell the entire house out, which is rare, we know, doesn't happen all the time, then we need to make the most of that. We have an obligation to our mission, to our organization, to our donors and funders, to kind of help ourselves and to leverage that demand to earn as much as we can in those instances.
It doesn't happen very much. Sellouts do not happen very often. And I love this notion. Not everybody's the Guthrie Theater in the United States that has 3 venues on their campus. Most have 1,000 seats or 2,000 seats or 700 seats. And what we need are 3 halls in one. So through a scale plan, you can actually create a perfectly right-sized experience for 200 seats and a perfectly or right-sized experience for 500 seats and for 750 and for 1,800 with the right planning.
So I'm going to talk about the whys of that because you reference managing demand. This is a pretty critical core part of what we talk about at TRG. And there are 3 elements to managing demand. The first is perception of success. The second is how we maximize revenue. And the third part does come to price, dynamic pricing, the impact dynamic pricing can have. And I'd like to talk about each of the 3 of those in a bit more detail. And you've started on it here. Why is it critical for us to create different houses within a venue? How does that relate to perception of success, and why is that so critical? Why do we believe that's so critical?
It's a foundation concept. You'll build on this. It's a foundation concept that goes back to the beginning of our work. When in every venue, there is what we call a perception window. So think about any venue that we experience, no matter if it's in the round or it's a traditional venue with multiple tiers and balconies. The front 75%, when it's full, front, back, and side to side, feels different than if people are scattered throughout the venue. So in a medium or low demand scenario, if we can get that perception window full, you are looking forward at the event. Around your peripheral vision are bodies. Artists on the stage look out into the venue and see bodies together. And it feels different. And the emotion, the feeling of that affects our perception of demand and success. And that perception has an impact on my belief in the organization's success and value.
Yeah, I think it's the perception of success, that phrase, is really about creating the energy and the feeling of a sold out show when we're not sold out.
Yes.
Right? That's fundamentally what it boils down to in the ways that you practically described. And you're absolutely right that feeling of a sold out, everybody loves the feeling in a venue when it's full and there's lots of energy around it. If we could harness that when we're in lower levels of demand, it can create this mutually beneficial cycle and relationship between artist and audience. I remember from my days being on a stage what it felt like when the audience is kind of really dispersed versus when the audience is full. It does impact you as a performer. You can't act like that's not the case out in the hall. And when you can feel the energy, to get a little woo-woo, and you can kind of feel the energy of the audience on stage, it does have an impact on your performance, which will have an impact on the audience member's experience of attending that particular performance, and creates this mutually beneficial cycle that can engender a feeling of success even when we're not sold out. And so that's what we're trying to create, because that connection, that feeling of success, from an audience member standpoint, justifies my decision to attend this, makes it feel like I've made the right decision. I've made the right and good investment in the money for these particular seats to attend this performance, makes me think that the theater is doing well, that it's thriving, and that I want to come back, that I have this experience that I want to replicate. And that's the hook, right? Ultimately, what we're trying to do is to not just say, great, that was a great night out. It was a great night out that I want to replicate, that I want to have again, and hopefully soon, right?
And tell people about it.
And tell people about it.
So does obsessing about this actually change audience behavior? How do we see this change behavior in a database?
We can see this change behavior in terms of where people are willing to buy. What parts of the theater are they willing to sit in? When we do this kind of work, when we carve out, let's say a 400-seat house out of a 1,000-seat house, what we're doing in practice is creating all price points that need to exist within that 400-seat house, but within a more tightly defined area within the theater. And so what we're allowing to do is we are allowing and creating opportunities for folks at different price points to sit in parts of the theater that are other times hard to sell, but could be visible. Sometimes in many venues, getting folks to buy top price seats that are right in the first couple of rows, really difficult. But they're a problem in this perception window that Joe was describing, that if I'm sitting in the middle of the middle and I'm in my highest demand seats and I'm looking ahead at the stage, but oh dear, I can see some rows of empty seats, and that doesn't feel good. Then the artist on stage notices that gap as well. So what it allows us to do is to create opportunities for audience members to get closer to the action, to sit in parts of the theater they wouldn't have been able to sit in before if they are motivated by, lower or entry-level pricing.
Do you know who else it affects? Is not just artists and patrons, but staffs. So, you know and have recently been part of that kind of change in an organization, and our clients and the field. When we have a changed result, when it goes from scattershot audiences that really feel like the hall isn't sold well, to clustered and organized audiences in the ways that, Brad, you've described, there's a shift in the perception of the staff too. It looks and feels different.
Absolutely. And we talk about this all the time. You tell people until someone experiences it. And I had a great experience that we priced the house in this way. We managed how many seats we opened at a time to keep those people front to back, side to side. And it wasn't a sold out house, but my colleague said to me, you said it would feel full, and darn it, you were right.
Yeah, right.
Because you're focused on the stage. You're looking to the sides and to the front.
Right.
You're not really focused on what's happening behind you. So it's powerful.
Right.
And that energy is so much
there can
stronger.
be an operational benefit to it as well,
Yeah,
right? I
right.
mean, there's a benefit to maybe not needing to have all parts of the building staffed or ushered or volunteered. However you're structurally doing that, it can relieve some pressure on the operational side as well. There could be downsides to that in terms of making sure we're not diminishing the audience members' experience in that as well. But there are opportunities to say, if I don't need all of my venue to be open on a particular night, there may be positive benefits from a staffing resource as well.
I think it's interesting that we pretend that we don't already do things that try to create this perception of success, the concept of dressing the house, which often happens through comping, through letting audience members move forward, the big noise of the seats going up as people clatter down to the front of the circle and stalls. So we instinctively know that this is important. And actors sometimes do ask, if they know it's a quieter performance, can you move people down? Mm-hmm. So this way we create that right from the off and through the sales cycle. Does this affect when people book or who has access to those seats?
Of course it does. If we manage demand, then what we do is invite the people who are the most frequent, the most loyal, into those seats that have the closest proximity, that have access to aisles and the places that are in demand. And if we marry up that scale planning, how we draw the lines, with the invitations to people in our database, then the people who are the most loyal get the best access. That's one of the key strategies in managing
Yes,
demand.
and people who are more price sensitive, if we have those lower price points down closer to the stage and in those early windows of seats that we need to and want to fill because they're highly visible, it will change their behavior, and people will start to buy earlier, and people will be able to access those seats early. Typically, a lot of times they're in the way back, and those people are going to move down. So by leveraging that price, you're changing that behavior, and you're filling the house and creating accessibility.
I think with so much of this, it kind of comes down to how much of our business are we being proactive about versus reactive about. And when you're managing demand in this way, you are developing and managing relationships in a very intentional and proactive way, as opposed to reacting late in the sales cycle to perhaps lower than expected demand or an undesirable fill pattern, and reacting in the moment and trying to pull only the levers that you have to pull in that moment in time, and often at great expense from a staff resource and energy and attention standpoint. That when we are having to paper, when we are having to invite people down, when we are having to panic discount at the end to try to see if we can't fill that part of the venue, that wasn't contemplated. that's not in a moment in a campaign plan. That's not in an hour of a person's day to say that it is usually, that is replacing something else. So again, this notion of opportunity cost, when we have to operate our businesses in that way, comes at an even greater expense. Not only signaling to folks that we are perhaps diminishing the value, or that we are in lower demand, or that we have to discount to get people in, we are also pulling our team away from doing the important work of advancing relationships intentionally.
There's another perception of success issue here that we haven't mentioned, and it's key. It's foundational to the way that we approach this work. So yes, there is a perception window. Yes, we want to ensure that when we're in middle or low demand, it feels like we are sold out or sold well. But the other perception truth in the ways that we approach this is that, let's just take the example of the multi-tiered traditional proscenium house. The balcony is a part of the venue that is scaled to not be the least expensive, in fact. In old school scale plans, if I have the budget to afford the lowest price tiers, I'm relegated to the furthest away seats. In our approach, as we've described, we enable all price points to be accessible, close in. But counter to that, as demand grows in that venue, the price tiers don't decline, they actually grow. And the behavioral change then in the patron, it reinforces buying early. Because if I'm in a demand scenario, then in fact, the seating inventory available to me is not going to be as good. It will be further away, and it will be more expensive as demand grows. And that is, that's an engineering proactive way to change behavior. Because if I call at the last minute for Hamilton, for Paddington, and the seat that I can get is in the second tier for 125 quid, then I say, but wait, where are the $40 seats? And the answer is, or 40-pound seats, and the answer is, well, they sold out weeks ago. Then I think, what do I have to do differently in my own? I'm gonna have to buy earlier next time to get those seats.
It's interesting because we as humans know when there is scarcity and we need to get in early. You referenced Harry Styles earlier on. You knew to get a ticket, you have to be in the queue because the perception of demand and perception of success was incredibly high. And so what you're describing here is for us to emulate that experience in our own venues to ensure that people make decisions to buy earlier. That's challenging for leaders in my experience, because we want to and should remain accessible through the whole sales cycle. And what does it mean if Mrs. Smith does call on the day and has a specific budget and the only seats available are outside of that budget range? How do we handle that when we are often non-profits, sometimes funded? How do we manage that tension?
It's the hardest part of working and managing demand in this way, is the instances of ticket buyers buying later in the sales cycle for performances that are perhaps higher levels of demand, right? Creating that situation that you've described. And it needs to be contemplated in the strategy from the very beginning. This is also like, we know this happens and will continue to happen, particularly around new audiences. New audiences are buying the very latest, right? If you're doing this well and you're managing the relationships well, your existing audiences are buying earlier, and so great. You're capturing that fill and that revenue earlier. Newer audiences are buying later.
Existing audiences have choices.
Audiences have choices, but the choice is also important for new audiences. So this is where we have to ensure that as the scale plan is filling, we are maintaining a degree of choice. Now, we can't guarantee it's going to be every single price point in all parts of the theater at all time. That starts to undermine and erode what the overarching strategy is. But providing choice for Mrs. Smith in the way that you described it, said, we no longer have the 40-pound seats, but I have these at 50, or we could look at a different performance to help understand what is more important, right? Ultimately, every decision from an audience member is going through a pretty simple sequence of priorities to say, is it when, is it where, is it how much? Those three questions are what every audience member is evaluating to different degrees in terms of its influencing, the degree to which it's influencing their decision to buy. And all we have to do is to help the customer navigate those three decisions efficiently. When, where, how much. And if we can do that by creating choice, by having different scale plans, by managing inventory strategically, odds are we can find a place that will meet Mrs. Smith's expectations and what she's looking for.
Yes, and that is a teaching moment for the box office staff to be able to say, are you on our mailing list? Did you know we have a membership that can offer you early access? Here's our programming. Would this be something that would be interesting to you? So training our staff, giving them the tools to have those conversations is really important as well.
Because it's just about being in a good relationship with someone, right? Here's someone who is interested in what we do, wants to attend, wants to invest their money into having a relationship with us. The very least we could do is engage with that person to let them know all the ways in which we could deepen that relationship with them, that we could strengthen it by membership, by early buying, by other maybe targeted specific discounting programs to certain events or certain nights throughout the run. I do think this is intentional to create those moments with our audience members so that we can actually advance a relationship by getting to know them just a little bit better.
It's really funny, though, how many conversations we've had with staff leaders. We put a value on seats in the balcony, and we say that seat isn't worth $100. That seat, we cannot possibly charge that for that seat. And that's the focus group of one. That's the emotional hurdle we often have to get people through, administrators through, less customers. I mean,
Absolutely.
Provided the options that you can get that 40-pound seat on Tuesday. Is Tuesday does that meet your criteria better? But it's often the administrators themselves who are the biggest hurdle to making this kind of shift.
I wonder if we need to ask ourselves the question, it's great if someone does call, right? But lots of people buy online. Mm-hmm. And our purchase paths are not as easy as almost every other sector seems to have that process. I'm not knocking the ticketing companies because it's a difficult thing to design. People choosing their own seats and people choosing what, concessions they have and all of the things. But I do think maybe we look at that problem a different way to say, actually, how can our purchase path create these options for people, allow people to navigate in the ways that maybe airlines do, which is you very clearly see the different flight times and the prices that are available, and you can decide, is my flight time important or is the price more important? Boy. And I wonder if that is the thing to look at first before maybe we shouldn't do it.
We underinvest in a lot of the most important resources within our businesses. And when we do invest in the website, right, it is rarely to the extent that we are investing in the degree to which perhaps other sectors would in the purchase path. When we hear about a website overhaul or website redo, an organization gets a new website, and yes, it's smooth, it's easy, it's nice, it looks good, it's interactive, but it almost never touches the kind of sales, the purchase path that's going on, so hard. Because the integration is so hard. But I think we undervalue our own leverage in demanding these kinds of tools and services from the vendors that we engage with, right? We invest massive amounts of money. These are really critical parts of our business that sometimes we feel are too scary or too complicated or too potentially messy for us to get in there and actually insist upon better, clearer purchase paths, right? Or really lean on our partnerships with vendors in order to put the customer and the patron at the center of those, to understand how important that is to our business. And instead, we tend to focus more on the aesthetics, on and the variability of
how to present
site.
the shows, and
Exactly
all of
right.
the other things we do as an organization.
All the things around it without getting to the core. And I'm not saying this is easy. I think what the point I'm trying to make is we often we cast it aside as being, well, that's just too much. That's too hard. That's too complicated. We couldn't possibly, or it's too expensive. And to say if 80% of our ticket revenues are coming through online
And phones.
and mobile phones, right? If that's where 80% of our ticket revenue is coming from, that can't be too expensive.
Right.
That can't be a lower priority in your business.
And you're also talking about the customer experience, the patron experience from the very first moment they go onto our website or they hear about us. They are developing an opinion about who we are and whether they want to spend their time and their money with us. And so making it easy and communicating really clearly, communicating through the website, through our email, and through all of our messaging, all of our channels. The things that are related to demand management is also important. Prices start at buy early to get the best seats. These messages, become a member, become a subscriber, save up to blah, blah, blah. It can also change behavior, impact when people are buying and what they're buying. And it is critical to building that relationship and building our revenue over time.
Now that you've heard this episode's takeaways, think about one action you can take this week to actively manage demand and drive stronger revenue and relationships. For more insights and resources, visit the link in the description below. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you soon for the next episode of Leading the Way.